Young man sells paintings on the street to pay for college. Then an elderly woman made an offer. Daniel Miller was desperate. There were only 2 days left until the college payment deadline, and he still needed $300 to complete the amount. His hands trembled as he arranged the canvases on the cloth spread out on the sidewalk of Blossom Street in downtown Asheville. "Please, ma'am, it's an original work," he pleaded, with a woman who was uninterestedly examining one of his landscapes. "I can do it for $40. The woman shook her head and walked away. Daniel sighed, running his hand through his dark hair that escaped the orange beret his grandmother had knitted years ago. That was his third attempt at a sale on that cold July morning. It was then that an elegant figure abruptly stopped in front of his canvases. Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, with impeccably styled silver hair and clothes that hinted at a high social standing, fixed her eyes on a specific painting. Her gloved hands trembled visibly. "Where did you see this?" she asked, her voice filled with an emotion Daniel couldn't decipher. The young man looked at the canvas that had caught the lady's attention. It was one of his most recent works, a garden with intense blue flowers, surrounded by a low stone wall. He had painted it from memory, inspired by a recurring dream he'd had since childhood. I haven't seen it anywhere. It came from my imagination," replied Daniel, confused by the woman's reaction. Mrs. Eleanor picked up the canvas with reverential care, as if it were a sacred relic. Tears began to stream down her carefully made-up cheeks. "This is impossible," she murmured. "This is the house where I grew up. Every detail. The blue azaleas my mother planted, the wall my father built. How could you have painted something that only exists in my memories?" Daniel felt a shiver run down his spine. This made no sense. How could he have painted a stranger's house? "Ma'am, it must just be a coincidence." "No, young man, it's not a coincidence," interrupted Mrs. Eleanor, drying her tears with an embroidered handkerchief. "My name is Eleanor Thompson. I suffer from a rare condition that is progressively erasing my visual memories. The doctors say that in a few months I won't be able to form new mental images or recover old ones." She held the painting to her chest, as if protecting a treasure. "But when I look at this canvas, for a moment I can see my childhood clearly. It's as if you've captured something I could no longer access myself." Daniel didn't know what to say. The situation was too surreal for his mind to fully process. "What's your name, dear?" "Daniel Miller, ma'am." "Daniel, I want to make a proposal. I need you to paint more memories I've lost. In return, I'll change your life," said Mrs. Eleanor, taking an elegant card from her purse. "This is the address of my home. Tomorrow at 3 in the afternoon. Don't be late." Before Daniel could respond, she placed 5 $100 bills next to the painting. "This is just an advance," she said, walking away with determined steps. Daniel stood still, looking alternately at the money and the card. $500. More than enough to pay for college. But what kind of crazy proposal was this? That night, Daniel could hardly sleep. He looked up the name Eleanor Thompson online and discovered she was the widow of a renowned art collector. The Thompson family possessed one of the oldest fortunes in Asheville, built 3 generations ago through investments in art and property. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. The next day, Daniel climbed the hill where the Thompson mansion was located. The property was impressive, with carefully planned gardens and architecture that blended classic and modern styles. When he rang the bell, a maid led him to a spacious living room with walls covered in valuable paintings. Mrs. Eleanor appeared wearing a blue silk outfit, her eyes still swollen as if she had cried during the night. "I'm glad you came, Daniel. Yesterday, after decades, I managed to dream of my parents again. Your painting gave me back something I thought I had lost forever." She led him to a small table where tea and cookies were served. "Before I fully explain what I need, I'd like you to tell me about your family. This talent for capturing memories, where does it come from?" Daniel hesitated. His family history wasn't something he was proud of. "My mother raised me alone. My father, well, he was never around. She works as a seamstress and does what she can to help me with college. As for the talent, I've always liked to draw. My maternal grandfather also painted, but he left when I was very young. Your maternal grandfather. What was his name? Frank Miller, but everyone called him Frankie. Why do you ask? Mrs. Eleanor's face visibly paled. She stood up abruptly and went to an old desk, from which she took out a yellowed photograph. Daniel, I need you to look at this. The photo showed a young man with features similar to Daniel's next to a distinguished gentleman and an elegant woman. In the background, part of a studio with canvases and brushes was visible. The younger man is your grandfather. This photo was taken here in this house over 40 years ago. He was an apprentice to my late husband, Anthony Thompson. Daniel felt the world spinning around him. He took the photo with trembling hands, studying every detail. There was no doubt, it was indeed his grandfather, but much younger than in the few memories he had of him. This is impossible. My grandfather never mentioned anything about working for a wealthy family. He was just a simple painter. He wasn't simple, Daniel. Frank was extremely talented. Anthony considered him like a son. They spent 3 years working together, creating magnificent works. Your grandfather had a special gift for capturing the emotional essence of people in his paintings. Mrs. Eleanor sat down again, her hands trembling slightly. But then something happened. A terrible argument. Frank left one night without explanations, taking only some of his personal works. Anthony was devastated. He never spoke about it again, but I know he tried to find him for years. What kind of argument? Asked Daniel, feeling he was about to discover something important about his family. I don't know exactly. Anthony never wanted to tell me the details. He just said that Frank had felt betrayed and that he couldn't blame him for it. Daniel studied the photograph again. There was something in his grandfather's expression that suggested genuine happiness. What could have happened to make everything change? Mrs. Eleanor, what exactly do you want me to do? I want you to paint my lost memories, Daniel. But now I understand that it's no coincidence your talent for capturing images that exist only in my mind. You inherited your grandfather's gift. Perhaps it's fate bringing us together to resolve something that was left unfinished. She stood up and led him to a large room that had been converted into a studio. There were canvases, paints, and professional quality brushes waiting. In each session, I'll tell you about a specific memory. You'll paint it. In return, besides good payment, I'll help you discover the truth about what happened between your grandfather and my husband. And if I can't paint your memories as you expect, you will, she said with absolute confidence. Yesterday you painted my childhood home without ever having seen it. That's no coincidence, Daniel, it's inheritance. Daniel looked around the studio, feeling a strange familiarity. It was as if he had been there before. When do we start? Now, replied Mrs. Eleanor, sitting in a comfortable armchair. I want you to paint the most precious memory I have, the day of my wedding to Anthony 52 years ago. She closed her eyes and began to describe the lace dress that had belonged to her grandmother, the flower-filled garden where they held the ceremony, Anthony's radiant smile when he saw her walking toward the altar. Every detail was narrated with almost photographic precision. Daniel began to paint, letting her words guide his brushes. Something extraordinary happened. As the colors took shape on the canvas, he began to visualize the scene as if he were actually present on that day in May 1971. After 2 hours of intense work, he stepped back to observe the result. The painting showed a radiant bride in a lush garden, with a groom looking at her as if she were the most important person in the universe. Mrs. Eleanor opened her eyes and let out a muffled cry. My God, that's exactly how it happened. Even the position of the flowers that fell from my hand when I stumbled slightly before reaching the altar. She approached the canvas, delicately touching one of the edges. How did you know I stumbled? I didn't mention that detail. Daniel looked at the painting, confused. He had indeed painted fallen flowers on the ground, but he didn't consciously remember making that decision. I don't know. I just felt it should be there. At that moment, the studio door swung open abruptly. A middle-aged woman, elegantly dressed but with a furious expression, entered like a whirlwind. "Mother, what's going on here?" she demanded, looking alternately at Mrs. Eleanor and Daniel. "Christine, this is Daniel. He's helping me with a special project." "Special project?" Christine Thompson examined Daniel from head to toe with suspicion. "Mother, you can't keep hiring strangers." "And what is this?" she asked, pointing at the painting. "It's our wedding, dear. Daniel managed to paint it exactly as it was." Christine approached the canvas, her expression changing from irritation to alarm. "Mother, how can this young man know intimate details of your wedding? What kind of information are you sharing with strangers?" "He's not a stranger," said Mrs. Eleanor calmly. "He's Frank Miller's grandson." The effect of this revelation on Christine was dramatic. She paled, then turned red with anger. "Frank Miller? That man who caused so much suffering for Dad? How can you bring his grandson into our home?" "Christine, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," she interrupted. "This young man is taking advantage of your condition to get money. He probably researched our family and is making up this whole story." Daniel stood up, offended. "I'm not taking advantage of anyone. Until yesterday, I didn't even know my grandfather knew you." "Of course you did," said Christine sarcastically. "And it's just a coincidence you show up right now when my mother is vulnerable." "Enough, Christine," said Mrs. Eleanor firmly. "Daniel will continue coming here. I need to recover my memories before it's too late." "I won't allow it," declared Christine. "I'll speak with Dr. Henry about this. He needs to know people are taking advantage of you." After Christine left, slamming the door, Mrs. Eleanor sighed deeply. "I apologize, Daniel. My daughter is worried about me, but sometimes she's overly protective. Maybe she's right. Maybe I should leave." "No," said Mrs. Eleanor with determination. "You're the only hope I have to preserve my memories, and I'm sure your presence here will help solve old mysteries." She went to a drawer and took out a sealed envelope. "Your grandfather left this behind when he departed. Anthony kept it all these years, hoping one day to return it. Now I know it was meant for you." Daniel opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small, old key. The letter said, "To whoever finds this in the future, the truth is hidden where colors live eternally. The key opens what was sealed by pain, but must one day be revealed for justice to be done. May my talent be used only for good, never for greed. Frank Miller." "What does this mean?" asked Daniel. "I'm not sure, but I have a theory. Anthony mentioned once that Frank was working on a special piece before he left, a painting that was never found. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Daniel studied the key. It was ornate, old, clearly made for something important. "Where do you keep the old artworks?" "We have a storage room in the basement, but Christine has the main keys. It would be hard to investigate without her knowing." "What if this key opens something specific there?" "It's possible," admitted Mrs. Eleanor. "But first, we need to continue with the painting sessions. Every memory you help me recover might contain clues about what happened." In the following days, Daniel established a routine. Every afternoon he went to the Thompson mansion, where he spent hours painting Mrs. Eleanor's memories. He painted her first meeting with Anthony, the trips they took through Europe, the birth of their children, intimate family moments. Each session revealed more about Anthony Thompson's personality. He was a man passionate about art, generous, but also stubborn and proud. Mrs. Eleanor described him as someone who deeply believed in loyalty and felt betrayed when that trust was broken. Anthony had a special project, she shared during one session. He wanted to create an art school for talented young people without resources. Frank was very excited about the idea. They spent hours planning how it would be. What happened to that project? It never left the drawing board. After Frank departed, Anthony never spoke of it again. It was as if the betrayal had killed his dreams. Daniel painted that memory, Anthony and Frank planning the school, their eyes shining with hope and determination. In the painting, the two men were examining architectural plans, surrounded by sketches and ideas. When Mrs. Eleanor saw the finished work, she held her breath. "Daniel, look there in the corner of the table. You painted some specific papers. Can you see what's written? Daniel approached the canvas. In small letters, almost imperceptible, was written Miller Thompson Foundation. I don't remember painting that consciously, he said, intrigued, because it wasn't you who wrote it. It was your genetic memory, inherited from your grandfather. Frank must have had a very strong emotional connection to this project. Meanwhile, Christine intensified her efforts to separate Daniel from her mother. She hired a private investigator to research the Miller family's past, hoping to find something that would disqualify Daniel. What she discovered, however, was disturbing for different reasons. Frank Miller had left Asheville abruptly in 1979, moving to a small town in rural Tennessee. He never painted professionally again, working as an elementary school teacher until retirement. Stranger still, there were no records of Frank selling any works after leaving Asheville, despite having been a prolific artist before that. Why would a talented artist simply stop painting? Asked Christine to the investigator. There are only two explanations. Either he lost his passion for art, or something happened that made him deliberately give it up. Christine began to suspect there was more to Frank's story than her mother knew. Meanwhile, Daniel continued his sessions, growing more intrigued with the discoveries. One afternoon, while painting a memory of Anthony working alone in his private studio, something caught his attention. Mrs. Eleanor, did your husband have a secret safe in the studio? Not that I knew of. Why do you ask? I'm painting a specific wall, but I feel there's something hidden behind it. It's a strange feeling. Mrs. Eleanor observed the painting. Daniel had portrayed Anthony painting, but in the background of the image, one of the studio walls seemed to have a different texture, as if there were a disguised door. Does this studio still exist? Yes, but it's been locked for years. It's on the 3rd floor of the house. Anthony didn't allow anyone to go in there after the problem with your grandfather. Can we go up there? Mrs. Eleanor hesitated. Christine expressly forbade me from going to that floor. She says it's dangerous for someone my age. But if there's something hidden there that can explain what happened... You're right, decided Mrs. Eleanor. Let's go up. The 3rd floor of the mansion was covered in a layer of dust and silence. Anthony's studio was spacious, with large windows that allowed abundant natural light to enter. There were empty easels, dried-up paint tubes, and abandoned brushes. Daniel went straight to the wall he had painted. Examining it closely, he found almost imperceptible signs that it had been altered. Here, he said, pointing to a specific section. There's something different about this part. They pressed different points on the wall until a small panel moved, revealing an old lock. Frankie's key fit perfectly. Behind the panel was a small safe. Inside it they found documents, some jewelry, and 3 miniature paintings. But what caught their attention the most was a letter in Anthony's own handwriting. Mrs. Eleanor read the letter aloud, her voice trembling. If someone is reading this, it's because something has happened to me and the secrets need to be revealed. Daniel Miller is not guilty of what I accused him. The truth is, I discovered that my own son, Edward, was selling pieces from our collection to pay off gambling debts. When I confronted Frank about some items that had disappeared, he told me that Edward had asked him to authenticate the sales, claiming I had authorized them. Daniel and Mrs. Eleanor exchanged looks, shocked. The letter continued. Frank refused to participate in the scheme when he found out Edward was lying. My son then accused him of stealing the pieces. I, blinded by anger and disappointment, believed Edward and confronted Frank. I expelled the best friend I ever had because of my own son's lies. Mrs. Eleanor had to sit down, the impact of the revelation too much to process. Edward never told me any of this, she murmured. He said that Frank had tried to steal some paintings and that Daddy had found out. Where is Edward now? Asked Daniel. He left 15 years ago, said he was going to try his luck in Europe. He sent letters sporadically, but we lost contact about 5 years ago. Anthony's letter had more revelations. I tried to find Frank to apologize, but he had completely disappeared. Edward made me promise never to tell Eleanor the truth, saying it would destroy our family. Like a coward, I agreed to carry this secret. But I can't take it to the grave. Frank Miller was an honorable man, and his talent was a gift I tried to smother with my unfair distrust. At the end of the letter, there was a specific instruction. I leave a substantial amount in my will to Frank Miller or his descendants, as compensation for the harm we caused. The legal documentation is at the office of Dr. Henry Wilson." Daniel felt a mix of relief and sadness. His grandfather had been innocent, but carried the pain of injustice until his passing. "Mrs. Eleanor, we need to tell Christine about this." "Yes, but she won't like the truth about her brother at all." When they went downstairs, they found Christine waiting in the living room, accompanied by a middle-aged man who introduced himself as Dr. Henry Wilson, the family lawyer. "Mom, where were you?" asked Christine irritably. "Dr. Henry came to discuss some important documents." "What kind of documents?" asked Mrs. Eleanor. "Related to your husband's will." "There are some clauses that were never executed," explained the lawyer, looking suspiciously at Daniel. "Is it about Frank Miller?" asked Mrs. Eleanor directly. Dr. Henry seemed surprised. "How do you know about that?" "We found Anthony's letter," she said, showing the document. Christine turned pale as she read the letter. "This is a lie," she declared. "Edward would never do such a thing, and even if it were true, we're not giving our inheritance to strangers." "Christine, they're not strangers. Daniel is Frank's grandson, and Anthony wanted to make amends for the injustice," argued Mrs. Eleanor. "Mom, you're being manipulated. This boy probably planted that letter there." Dr. Henry carefully examined the document. "I can confirm it's Anthony's handwriting, and the will does specify an amount for Frank Miller or direct descendants." "How much?" asked Christine in a tense voice. $500,000 plus a perpetual art scholarship." The silence that followed was heavy. Daniel couldn't process the information. $500,000 was more money than his family had ever seen in their entire lives. "I'll contest this," declared Christine. "I won't let opportunists benefit from a situation they weren't even part of." "Christine, your father left clear instructions," said Dr. Henry. "Legally, there's no way to contest it." "There is one condition," continued the lawyer, reading more details from the will. "The inheritance will only be released if Daniel can complete Frank Miller's unfinished work." "What work?" asked Daniel. "According to Anthony, Frank was working on a special painting before he left. If it's found and completed, it will definitively prove the artistic connection between the families." Mrs. Eleanor stood up with determination. "Daniel, you need to find that painting. It's the only way to do justice to your grandfather and secure your future." "But where can I look? My grandfather left decades ago. It could be anywhere." "We have to start with the places where he might have hidden something here in the house before he left," suggested Mrs. Eleanor. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. In the following days, Daniel and Mrs. Eleanor searched every corner of the mansion for clues about Frank's lost work. Christine watched them with growing suspicion, occasionally making sarcastic comments about ridiculous treasure hunts. It was during a search in the attic that Mrs. Eleanor found an old box with Frank's belongings that Anthony had kept. Inside were sketches, studies for paintings, and a notebook. Daniel flipped through the notebook, trying to decipher his grandfather's handwriting. Most of it was reflections on artistic techniques, but one entry caught her attention. "True art is born from pain, transformed into beauty. My masterpiece will be proof that injustice cannot destroy creation. I hide it where only eyes that understand the language of colors will find it." "Where only eyes that understand the language of colors," repeated Daniel. What could that mean? Mrs. Eleanor examined other papers from the box. "Look at this," she said, showing a rudimentary map of the property. "Frank drew something here." The map showed the mansion and the gardens, but there were strange markings, small colored circles in specific locations. "They are the primary colors," observed Daniel. "Red here in the gazebo, blue at the fountain, yellow in the greenhouse. What if it's a code, if we follow the colors in a specific sequence?" They went out to the garden, following the markings on the map. In the gazebo, they found red tiles with an unusual pattern. At the fountain, there were blue mosaics that formed a specific design. In the greenhouse, they discovered that some yellow stones were arranged differently from the others. "Wait," said Daniel, observing the three locations from an elevated perspective. "If we connect the dots, they form an arrow pointing to that old tree." It was a century-old oak tree at the back of the property. As they approached, they noticed something unusual about its trunk. A small, concealed recess, almost imperceptible. Inside the recess, protected by a waterproof box, was a medium-sized framed painting. The work showed three figures, an older man teaching art to a young man, while a woman watched with admiration. In the background there was the outline of an art school. "It's Dad, Frank and me," murmured Mrs. Eleanor, gently touching the canvas. "But it's incomplete. Indeed, several parts of the painting were only sketched, as if Frank had stopped in the middle of the work." "The condition of the will," remembered Daniel. "I need to complete the work." But when they took the painting inside the house, Christine exploded in fury. "This is a fraud," she shouted. "You planted this painting there to deceive my mother." "Christine, how could we have planted something that your own father mentioned in the will?" argued Mrs. Eleanor. "I don't know, but I won't allow our family to be deceived." The tension escalated when Christine threatened to sue Daniel for trespassing and attempted fraud. The situation became so tense that Dr. Henry suggested a formal meeting with all parties. At the meeting, which took place in the lawyer's office, Christine brought her own evidence. The investigator she had hired discovered that Frank had indeed stopped painting after leaving Asheville, which, according to her, proved that he had lost his talent due to guilt over his crimes. "If my grandfather were guilty, why would your father keep his belongings for decades?" questioned Daniel. "Maybe Dad was too sentimental," countered Christine. It was then that Dr. Henry revealed more details of the will. "There is a sealed letter that Anthony left, with instructions to be opened only if there were disputes over Frank's inheritance. He broke the seal and read the contents. The letter detailed exactly how Edward had manipulated the situation, including dates, amounts, and even names of people who could confirm the facts." Christine was visibly shaken as the details were revealed. Her brother had not only sold family artworks, but also forged documents and bribed officials to cover up his crimes. "Why did Dad never tell me this?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Because he loved you both and didn't want to destroy the image you had of Edward," explained Dr. Henry. "But the guilt was consuming him. The revelation completely changed the dynamic." Christine, faced with irrefutable evidence of Frank's innocence and Edward's guilt, began questioning everything she believed about the past. "I need time to process this," she said, leaving the meeting visibly shaken. Daniel returned to the mansion with Mrs. Eleanor, both emotionally drained. The truth had been revealed, but the emotional cost for the entire family was high. "I'm going to finish my grandfather's painting," declared Daniel. "It's what he would have wanted." During the following days, Daniel worked intensively on the unfinished piece. As he added details to the figures and background, he felt a strange connection with his grandfather, as if Frank were guiding his brushes. The painting came to life on its own. The characters' expressions became more vivid, the colors more vibrant. Daniel added elements that weren't in the original sketches, but seemed to naturally belong to the composition. When he finally finished, the work showed not just three people, but an entire vision of the future. The art school operating, young people painting, families gathering to appreciate art. It was a portrait of dreams fulfilled. Mrs. Eleanor cried when she saw the completed painting. "Frank was right," she said. "Art can transform pain into beauty." At that moment, Christine appeared at the studio door. She had spent days reflecting on the revelations and seemed like a different person. "Daniel, I need to apologize," she said, her voice choked. "I was protecting the wrong memory. Edward destroyed our family, not Frank." She approached the painting, observing every detail. "This is extraordinary. You truly have his talent." "Thank you," said Daniel, still cautious about her change in attitude. "I want to make a proposal," continued Christine. "Instead of just executing Dad's will, why don't we make the dream he and Frank had a reality?" "What do you mean?" "Let's create the art school they planned. You can be the artistic director. We'll use part of the inheritance to fund the project, and my mother can teach art history." Daniel was speechless. The idea was even grander than anything he had imagined, but this would cost much more than the $500,000 from the will. "I've been thinking a lot about our family's legacy," said Christine. "Edward shamed our name. It's time to do something that honors Dad's memory properly." Mrs. Eleanor applauded her daughter's proposal. "It's perfect. Anthony would be proud." In the following months, the project took shape. They converted part of the Thompson property into a community art school. Daniel used his inheritance to buy equipment and materials, while Christine contributed a substantial amount for renovations and expansion. The opening of the Miller-Thompson Art School was an emotional event. Young people from all social classes enrolled in the first classes. Daniel taught painting techniques, Mrs. Eleanor gave lessons on art history, and Christine managed the administrative side. What moved Daniel most was seeing a framed painting at the school's entrance, the work he had completed, showing Frank, Anthony, and Mrs. Eleanor planning exactly what was becoming reality. During the opening ceremony, an elderly lady approached Daniel. "Are you Frank Miller's grandson?" she asked. "Yes, Mom." "I knew your grandfather. I lived in the town where he spent his last years. I wanted you to know he never completely stopped painting." Daniel felt his heart quicken. "What do you mean?" "He painted for orphaned children, made murals in schools. He never charged anything. He said art should serve to heal, not to make money." The revelation made Daniel understand that his grandfather had found a way to deal with his pain, using his art to help others, even after being wronged. The school prospered quickly. Within a year, there was already a waiting list for classes. Daniel developed special programs for seniors, inspired by the work he did with Mrs. Eleanor, helping people recover memories through art. Christine proved to be a competent and dedicated administrator. The experience of discovering the truth about her brother had transformed her, making her more empathetic and less concerned with social status. Mrs. Eleanor had become the soul of the school. Her art history classes were always full, and she loved telling stories about famous artists. Her medical condition had stabilized, apparently benefiting from constant mental stimulation. One day, Daniel received an unexpected letter. It was from Edward Thompson. "Daniel, I heard through mutual acquaintances about the school and the truth that was revealed. I cannot return to the United States. There are debts and legal problems that make it impossible. But I want you to know that I carry the guilt of what I did every day. Frank was a good man, and I destroyed his life because of my cowardice and greed. I hope the school serves as reparation, even if belated, for the damage I caused." Edward. Daniel showed the letter to Christine and Mrs. Eleanor. They decided not to respond, but kept the letter as part of the complete family history. 2 years after the school opened, Daniel organized a special exhibition, Recovered Memories. It was a display of paintings created by the elderly students, each representing an important memory from their lives. Mrs. Eleanor contributed several works, including a painting of the day she met Anthony, and another showing Frank teaching Daniel to paint. The last one had a special touch. She had painted something she had never witnessed, but felt was true. The success of the exhibition attracted local media attention. Journalists wanted to know about the school's history and the innovative method of using art for memory recovery. Daniel always told the full story, the injustice his grandfather suffered, the discovery of the truth, and how art had been the means of healing and reconciliation. "Art has the power to unite generations," he explained to reporters. "My grandfather planted a seed that could only bloom decades later, through his grandson." One of the most dedicated students at the school was Mary, a 70-year-old woman who had partially lost her sight due to diabetes. She learned to paint using textures and reliefs, creating extraordinary works that touched people through touch as well as sight. "Daniel taught me that we don't just see with our eyes," Mary said. "We see with our hearts, and with our hands too." The school began receiving visits from educators from other cities, interested in replicating the model. Daniel and Christine developed a training program for teachers, spreading the methodology to other communities. Mrs. Eleanor became a kind of local celebrity. Her story of recovering memories through art inspired doctors and therapists. She began giving lectures at hospitals and geriatric clinics. "Each painting is a window to the past," she explained, "and when you look through that window, you don't just see what was, but you better understand who you are today." Daniel established a special tradition at the school. Every new student received a small reproduction of the painting his grandfather had completed. It was a way of remembering that all dreams, even interrupted ones, can find a way to come true. The school also developed partnerships with local hospitals, bringing artistic activities to patients with memory problems. The results were surprising. People who had lost the ability to communicate verbally could express themselves through colors and shapes. One of the most emotional moments for Daniel was when his mother, Mrs. Susan, visited the school for the first time. She had worked hard her whole life as a seamstress, never having had the opportunity to study art. "My father would be proud," she said, watching a class of children painting in the garden. "He always said art was for everyone, not just the rich." Mrs. Susan enrolled in the beginner painting classes. She discovered she had a natural talent for landscapes, especially for capturing the golden afternoon light. "It's hereditary," Daniel joked, "the Miller gift." The school became an important cultural center for Asheville. Beyond regular classes, it promoted art festivals, concerts, and theater performances. The old Thompson mansion had transformed into a space of life and creativity. Christine found a new passion in cultural management. She discovered she had a talent for securing sponsorships and developing partnerships with local businesses. The school became financially self-sustaining in less than 3 years. "I never imagined I'd be happier running an art school than managing the family business," she admitted to Daniel. Mrs. Eleanor developed a special project, painting family stories. She helped people create visual records of their family histories, especially those at risk of being lost over time. "Every family has secrets and treasures," she would say. "Art helps us preserve the treasures and heal the wounds left by secrets." The program was so successful that it expanded to other cities. Mrs. Eleanor traveled regularly to give workshops, always accompanied by Daniel or Christine. On one of these trips they met Robert, a young man from humble beginnings, who reminded them very much of Daniel in his early days, selling paintings on the street. Robert had lost his parents in an accident and lived with his grandmother in difficult conditions. "I want to learn to paint to make money," Robert said frankly. "I'll teach you to paint for a living," Daniel replied. "The money comes as a consequence." Robert became one of the school's most dedicated students. His story inspired the creation of a scholarship program for youth in vulnerable situations. The school began documenting all of its students' stories. Daniel realized that every person who arrived there brought a unique narrative of overcoming, loss, dreams, and rediscovery. "We're not just an art school," he reflected during a board meeting. "We're a center for healing through creativity." This philosophy spread. The school began receiving students from other cities and even other states. Some people came specifically to participate in the memory recovery programs. Dr. Henry, the lawyer, became a regular at the school. Despite never having shown artistic interest before, he discovered he had a special talent for sculpture. "I've always worked with words," he said, shaping clay with his hands, "but there's something liberating about creating without needing to explain." The school also attracted the attention of university researchers interested in the impact of art on mental health and memory recovery. Several academic studies were conducted documenting the methods developed by Daniel and Mrs. Eleanor. One study showed that patients with early-stage dementia who participated in the school's artistic activities had slower disease progression. The results were published in medical journals, giving even more credibility to their work. Daniel became a national reference in art therapy for the elderly. He was invited to give lectures at universities and medical conferences, always emphasizing that his method was born from personal need, not academic theory. "My grandfather taught me that art must serve life," he explained. "There's no use creating beautiful theories if they don't touch people's hearts." The story of the Miller-Thompson Art School spread through documentaries and articles in national magazines. Several companies offered investments to expand the project, but Daniel and Christine were always careful to maintain the school's community essence. "We don't want to become a franchise," Christine would explain. "Every community needs to develop its own way of using art to heal." 5 years after the school opened, Daniel organized a special exhibition, The Legacy of Frank Miller. The display included the few original works by his grandfather they had managed to locate, the paintings Daniel had created by completing Mrs. Eleanor's memories, and works by school students inspired by the family history. The centerpiece of the exhibition was the unfinished painting that Frank had hidden in the tree, now completed by Daniel. Beside it, a plaque told the whole story: the injustice, the discovery of the truth, and the transformation of pain into something beautiful and useful. During the exhibition opening, Daniel gave an emotional speech. "My grandfather planted seeds that could only germinate decades later. He never knew that his art would continue to touch lives through generations. This teaches me that our actions today can create waves of good that will only be seen in the future." Mrs. Eleanor, now over 70 but still active and sharp, added, "Frank and my husband dreamed of a school where art would serve to unite people. Today we see that dreams have no expiration date. They just wait for the right time to come true." The exhibition attracted visitors from across the country. Many left inspired to create similar projects in their own communities. Robert, the young man who had arrived at the school just wanting to make money, became one of the most beloved instructors. He developed special methods to teach art to street children, always emphasizing that creativity can be a way to escape poverty. "Daniel taught me that we don't paint to escape reality," Robert would tell his students. "We paint to create a better reality." The school began receiving official recognition. The mayor of Asheville declared the institution a city cultural heritage. The state government included the school in a program supporting innovative social initiatives. But the recognition that moved Daniel the most came from an unexpected source. A letter arrived at the school, sent by a former neighbor of Frank Miller in the town where he had spent his final years. "Dear Daniel, I learned about the school through a television report. I want you to know that your grandfather spoke of you constantly in his last years. He said he felt you would be an artist, even though he never saw you paint." Frank kept newspaper clippings of all the art exhibitions in Asheville, hoping one day to see your name in them. He would be immensely proud to know that you not only became an artist, but used that gift to help others. "With affection, Mrs. Margaret." The letter confirmed something Daniel had always felt. Even separated by distance and circumstances, he and his grandfather had maintained a connection that transcended time and space. The school continued to grow and adapt to the community's needs. New programs were created: workshops for visually impaired people, art therapy for former drug addicts, and artistic activities for families in the process of reconciliation. Christine became a passionate advocate for art as a tool for social inclusion. She wrote a book about the family's experience and how the discovery of the truth had transformed their lives. "Sometimes, we need to question everything we believed about the past to build a better future," she wrote in the final chapter. Mrs. Eleanor became the school's unofficial matriarch. Students of all ages sought her out for advice, not just about art, but about life. Her wisdom, tempered by the experience of nearly losing her memories and recovering them through painting, was highly valued. "Memory isn't just about the past," she often said. "It's about how the past prepares us to create the future." The tradition of painting memories spread beyond the school. Several families in Asheville began hiring Daniel or other instructors from the school to create visual records of their family stories. This service became especially popular among families who were losing elderly patriarchs or matriarchs. The paintings became a way to preserve not just faces, but an entire atmosphere of a time and emotion. Daniel developed a special technique for this type of work. He conducted long conversations with family members, capturing not only visual details, but also sensations, smells, sounds, and emotions associated with the memories. "I don't just paint what was seen," he explained, "I paint what was felt." These memory paintings became precious family heirlooms. Often, Daniel would receive phone calls years later from people telling him how those works had helped keep the memory of loved ones alive. The school also became an informal research center on the relationship between art and memory. Psychologists, geriatric doctors, and neuroscientists frequently visited the institution to observe the methods developed. Dr. Sandra Johnson, a neuropsychologist who studied dementia, became a regular collaborator with the school. "What you do here confirms many theories about how creativity stimulates areas of the brain that remain active even when other cognitive functions deteriorate," she explained. The collaboration with Dr. Sandra led to the development of more structured protocols for using art in the prevention and treatment of memory problems. The school became a living laboratory for this research. Daniel never lost sight of his humble origins. He maintained the habit of setting up a small exhibition of student works once a month on the same sidewalk where he had sold his paintings years before. "It's important to remember where we come from," he told the students who accompanied him on these outings. "The street taught me that real art is what touches the hearts of ordinary people." These street exhibitions became anticipated events in the community. Residents of downtown Asheville knew that on the first Saturday of each month, they could see and buy artwork at affordable prices while chatting with the artists about their stories. Many students at the school discovered they had a talent for selling their works. A special program was created to teach practical aspects of an artistic career: how to price works, participate in exhibitions, and develop a personal style. Mary, the lady with vision problems who created tactile paintings, became one of the most sought-after artists. Her works were acquired by collectors from across the country, interested in the originality of her technique. "I lost part of my sight, but I gained a new way of seeing," she said, always optimistic. The school began promoting exchanges with similar institutions in other countries. Daniel traveled to Spain, France, and Italy, learning about different approaches to art therapy. These trips brought new techniques and perspectives to the school. Daniel discovered that despite cultural differences, art's ability to heal and connect people was universal. "Pain and joy have the same colors anywhere in the world," he observed after visiting an art therapy center in New York. The international experiences also confirmed that the model developed at the Miller-Thompson Art School was innovative even by world standards. The combination of memory recovery through painting with social inclusion was unique. Robert became the first student at the school to receive a scholarship to pursue an undergraduate degree in art therapy at a federal university. His final thesis was on Art as a Tool for Social Transformation, the case of the Miller-Thompson Art School. "Daniel changed my life, but the school changed the life of an entire community," wrote Robert in his research. The school celebrated 10 years of operation with a big party. Former students came from various cities to join the celebration. Our special exhibition gathered works created over the decade, showcasing the artistic and personal growth of hundreds of people. During the party, Daniel announced a new project, creating a permanent fund to ensure the school could always offer scholarships to underprivileged students. "We want no talented young person to miss out on studying art due to lack of resources," he declared. Christine revealed that she had left her entire personal inheritance to this fund, securing the project's sustainability for many decades. "This school has become my child," she said, moved, "and I want it to grow and thrive far beyond my own existence." Mrs. Eleanor, now 80 years old but still active, gave the closing speech at the party. "When Daniel showed up selling paintings on the street, I was losing my memories and thought my life was coming to an end. Today, at 80, I feel like I'm living the richest and most meaningful period of my existence. Art not only preserved my past, it created a future I never imagined possible." The party ended with a special performance. A choir formed by school students sang a song composed by one of the music students, with lyrics based on the poems that Frank Miller wrote in his notebook. The song spoke of seeds planted by one generation that bloom in the hands of the next, of dreams that transcend time, and of art as the universal language of love. During the performance, Daniel looked around and saw faces of all ages moved by the music. Children, youth, adults, and seniors united by the common experience of discovering that everyone has an inner artist waiting to be awakened. In that moment, he fully understood his grandfather's legacy. Frank Miller hadn't just painted pictures, he had planted the idea that art belongs to everyone and should serve to heal and unite, not to divide and exclude. The school continued to evolve. New courses were added: therapeutic photography, creative writing for memory preservation, music as a tool for intergenerational connection. Each new activity maintained the original spirit, using creativity to heal wounds, preserve stories, and build bridges between people of different backgrounds and generations. Daniel married Anna, a psychologist who had arrived at the school as a researcher and ended up falling in love with both the project and the director. Together, They had 2 children, who grew up playing among the school's canvases and brushes. "Our children are growing up believing it's normal to use art to solve problems," Anna observed. "I wonder what kind of world they'll create when they grow up." From a young age, the children showed artistic talent and, more importantly, a special sensitivity to understanding that art can be a tool for healing. Christine never married, but found complete fulfillment in her work at the school. She became a national reference in managing cultural projects with social impact. "I found my calling at 50, she used to say. "It's never too late to discover who we really are." Mrs. Eleanor lived to be 92, always active at the school. In her later years, she developed a special project, teaching young children to paint the stories their grandparents told, creating a visual archive of the region's family traditions. "Children paint what they feel when they hear the stories," she explained. "It's a way to preserve not just the facts but the emotions those stories awaken." When Mrs. Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep, the school organized a special exhibition with all the memories she had recovered through painting during her years of therapy with Daniel. The exhibition was called A Life in Colors and showed how art had transformed the progressive loss of memory into a journey of rediscovery and creation. Daniel continued running the school for many years, always innovating and adapting the methods to the community's needs. He wrote several books on art therapy, but his greatest pride were the transformation stories he witnessed daily. The school became a model for similar projects throughout the United States. Daniel often traveled to consult on how to adapt the Miller-Thompson model to different local realities. "Every community has its own pains and its own resources," he taught. "The important thing is to understand that art can be the bridge between problems and solutions." Robert became the school's assistant director and developed special programs for youth in conflict with the law. His own story of overcoming made him especially effective in reaching teenagers who had lost hope. "No one is born condemned," Robert would tell these young people. "Everyone has a masterpiece inside them waiting to be created." Robert's programs were so successful that he was invited by the state government to replicate them in other cities. The recidivism rate among youth who participated in the art programs was significantly lower than average. The school always maintained its community spirit. Even with national and international recognition, it never lost focus on the ordinary people in the region who truly needed the services offered. A special tradition was kept. Every year, on the school's anniversary, Daniel set up a small exhibition on the same sidewalk where he had met Mrs. Eleanor. It was a way to remember that great transformations can start with simple and seemingly casual encounters. During one of these commemorative exhibitions, a young woman approached Daniel with a determined look he immediately recognized. "Sir, I paint, but I need to sell my works to pay for college," she said, showing some canvases in a style similar to what Daniel used to do in his youth. Daniel smiled, remembering his own determination years ago. "What's your name?" "Beatrice Williams." "Beatrice, I have a proposal for you." And so the cycle continued. New talents being discovered, new stories being written, new bridges being built through art. The Miller-Thompson Art School had become much more than a place of learning. It was a living laboratory of social transformation, an example of how creativity can be used to heal old wounds and build more hopeful futures. Daniel, now a mature man, looked at everything that had been built and knew his grandfather would be proud. Frank Miller had planted a seed of art and justice that had grown far beyond what anyone could have imagined. The last painting Daniel created for the school's permanent exhibition showed 3 generations: Frank teaching Anthony, Anthony teaching Daniel, and Daniel teaching the children of the community. In the background of the image, an art school functioning fully, with people of all ages creating, learning, and healing together. End of story. And you, dear listener, what did you think of this story of transformation and hope? Have you ever been in a situation where art or creativity helped you overcome difficulties? Tell us your experience in the comments. We really want to know. If this story has touched your heart, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional narratives like this one. Your participation motivates us to keep sharing stories that inspire and transform.